Okay, welcome to the fourth episode of the Collaboration Podcast. My name is Jonathan Kay, and I'm here with my co-host Marco Massi, as always. And we are members of the Sri Aurobindo Association of America, an organization that produces the Collaboration Journal. A little bit about collaboration. So Collaboration is now in its 48th year of publication and is a journal dedicated to the evolutionary vision of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Collaboration examines the theory and practice of integral yoga, the place of humankind in the universe, and themes such as consciousness, emergence, and transformation. Articles, essays, poetry, and images explore the human impulse towards perfection and speculate on future possibilities as we move forward in a rapidly changing world.
Martha Orton is a member of the Sri Aurobindo Association's Editorial Advisory Board. Martha is a writer and scholar with a PhD in Sri Aurobindo Studies. She has been a devotee of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother for many years, having lived in both the Sri Aurobindo Ashram and in Auroville, and is the author of several books and numerous journal articles on integral yoga. Martha's books include The Quest for Knowledge and Mastery, a comparative study of motivation in the light of Sri Aurobindo, and Journey to Oneness, a short work with a philosophical basis for understanding the concept of oneness explained by Sri Aurobindo. Hi, Martha. Welcome to our podcast.
Good day. Thank you.
So I would like to begin, perhaps, as usual, we do perhaps with our guests, the personal question and about your background and so on, and which can be summarized, perhaps, not summarized, certainly not, but it can give us a glimpse of your life and who you are and where you are coming from. If I ask you how you knew first of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and how your life was in the ashram and in Auroville.
Sure, thank you. I'll be really happy to talk about my experience with discovering Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. It was wonderful, of course. And interestingly, it was related to my birthday many years ago. Sri Aurobindo and the Mother explained that on birthdays, we're particularly receptive. We're more in touch with their spirit. And what happened on my birthday was that I opened a copy of the Washington Post, which this was the April issue closest to my birthday. And it was, there was a two-page spread about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and about the ashram and Auroville. And this was because this was in 1972. So I realized eventually, only recently, that was 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago for me, because my birthday was in April. Anyway.
Which day?
15th.
15th. I'm asking because I have the 4th of April.
Very nice.
We have the same month birthday.
Very good. You know, April is a good month to be born. That's when spring lambs come in. Or maybe in March, but around that time. Anyway, this was a revelation to me. All my life changed from reading that article in the Washington Post, especially because it explained a lot about Sri Aurobindo's perspective on reality and on truth and what the world consists of. And that just really opened my mind and my consciousness. I had been seeking solutions to my questions in Christianity, and I just wasn't able to find them. I think they were there, but with the approach that I had at the time, I wasn't able to discover that. And actually, the article in the Washington Post came about because there was a member of the ashram at that time who had a brother who was a writer for the Washington Post. And the Post owned Newsweek. It was part of the same corporation that owned Newsweek magazine. And shortly after that Sunday issue, there was an article in Newsweek titled "A New Religion?" ? And of course, we know it's not a religion, but limitations of the mind and common culture would see it that way rather than an overarching worldview and an approach. But to talk about my experience in the ashram, I was there for 5 years, and those were very precious years to me. Probably the most meaningful of my life, and I would love to get back to that state of consciousness that I had at that time. I think it's within my reach, but I think the circumstances and living among the people that I lived with, having the communal focus on the yoga was really extraordinary. And I was privileged to work in the ashram archives and to be able to work for preserving the records. I initiated a conservation program. A wonderful man who was then in charge of the archives, Jantilal Parekh, directed me to work out a conservation program. And a lot's been done since that time, especially by Barbie Daly. And the in charge there now is Bob Zwicker, who's also an American, and he's doing really wonderful work with the archives. Because I had a small publishing company, when I first went to the ashram, I was able to meet some of the ashram writers, Manoj Das, the author, and also Amal Kiran, with whom I developed a close friendship. And I actually published, when I went back to the States from my first trip to the ashram, I was able to publish a book of his unpublished poems, Altar and Flame, which I think is still available from Shabda. Interestingly to me, Amal also discovered Sri Aurobindo in a similar way through a newspaper. He had bought a pair of sandals when he was living in Bombay, now Mumbai, and the sandals were wrapped in newspaper. And it was that there was a story about Sri Aurobindo in the newspaper, and that's how he discovered Sri Aurobindo. And it was, of course, life-changing for him too, as well as so many people. And in Auroville, I lived there for 6 years, and I taught in the schools, even when we didn't have many textbooks. In fact, I taught largely without textbooks. And that was an adventure. It was interesting. And I'm still in touch with some of the children that were in my classes. I saw just a couple of years ago one of those students, and also through AVI USA, there's some students who, former students of mine who are now officers of that. So it was a very good experience. And I wasn't one of the original pioneers, but I came there early on and appreciate the challenges of that experience, and especially the reforestation efforts, which have just been extraordinary.
Martha, when was this? In what time period, time frame? The first and second time when you went there?
Well, I first of all went to the ashram in 1973. I think it was March. There was a wonderful woman in the United States named Ida Patterson who did fundraising for Auroville. And she put me in touch with someone that I could travel with. So we went over in March of 73. And this was, of course, just a few months after the mother's passing. And it was an extraordinary time. I was able to meet many devotees, many ashramites, who felt that losing the mother meant an expansion of the work, an expansion of her consciousness over the surface of the earth. And I think that's true. I don't think they were just trying to put that in positive terms, but I think that's very true.
Martha, could I just ask a question along these lines? Because it seems to me that a theme of the upcoming Om conference, which has been announced and that SAA, the Sri Aurobindo Association, is organizing, is exploring collective yoga. And I just wanted to ask you about your experience living in the ashram, living in Auroville, where, like you said, there is this emphasis on communal living, communal life, and communal sadhana in a way. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, maybe some of the differences in terms of individual sadhana and your experience of being in those communities, and what collective yoga was like, or how it came to you.
I believe that practicing yoga in a group, as collective yoga, offers a great deal of support. In the ashram, just having that atmosphere of the ashram is a huge support. I don't know how that's changed since the 70s and 80s, but I doubt that it has. I think their constant presence there, Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Having the experience of group meditations in the playground was a very precious experience and a great support. We also saw movies in the playground on Saturday nights, and that was nice, lighthearted. I remember some of those films still. So that was another collective experience. But I think the support of other devotees is really important. Now, I'm really blessed in my personal life by having a spouse who's a devotee, Robert, and together we meditate together morning and evening. We read together Savitri before we go to sleep at night, and then we're reading Hymns to the Mystic Fire in the evening too. And I think, although there are only two of us, it makes a big difference. And collective yoga is certainly a great support, and there's strength in numbers, that's for sure. And in Auroville too, just the knowledge that people were there for human unity and believed in the ideals of the place and the yoga of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, the integral yoga, it creates a different atmosphere. And I think it's a great support, as I keep saying. There's nothing like that. And it's just amazing in that way. And I think, although I feel a bit of a loss not being in community as such now, I think the goals of the yoga are certainly attainable on the individual basis in one sadhana. It depends particularly on the focus that you give and the intensity of your aspiration. And aspiration fluctuates over time. It's the initial inspiration which brings you to the yoga. It's something you can't expect to sustain at that same level. When you have this first revelation, a real discovery that changes your whole worldview and your interpretation of life and its meaning, you can hold to that, but not with the same intensity. I don't think you can maintain that intensity over decades, but you can aspire to get that back at some stage in life.
So yeah, and it is an invitation for more collaboration. That's why we and living together and creating communities. That's also why this journal is called the Collaboration Journal, by the way. And it's very interesting to hear about your personal life. It might be interesting to know even more about that. Yeah? But perhaps we can eventually organize a specific podcast only on that, because it's really inspiring to hear of people who have been at the ashram or in Aurobindo and had their an experience for a longer time than I did, because I was just 2 weeks. It was more as a tourist. But one of the topics of today was also that to discuss your participation, your collaboration to collaboration. Sorry for that wordplay. And about your article in the upcoming issue, and which is entitled "The Role of the Avataar." And yeah, so perhaps my first question would be that to ask you, what led you to write this article? Why, how came this idea up, and what motivated you to write exactly about this topic, something?
The origin of the article was really reading in essays on the Gita. I hadn't read that and that work of Sri Aurobindo, so I realized that was something missing from my reading of and exploration of his literature. And so I was reading that and deeply affected by it, and feeling that it would be really important for me, for my personal experience, to put into words what I felt Sri Aurobindo was saying.
And could you summarize a little bit of that article, kind of paraphrase the main ideas that came through when you were writing that?
Yes. Sri Aurobindo says that the Avataar comes to earth to make a link between earth and heaven, between the consciousness, ordinary human consciousness, and the consciousness of which we are capable, the infinite divine consciousness, which is really a part of what he conceives that we are capable of participating in. So in the Gita, Krishna, the Avataar, speaks to Arjuna. He's the fellow who's reluctant to fight. This is the whole story of the Mahabharata, but he represents the ordinary man, or the heroic man, actually, because he's faced with upholding the truth, upholding the Dharma, as it were, because the law. And he's reluctant to fight because his relatives are involved. He would be fighting his relatives. And he has to do that. And Krishna tells him why he needs to do that, because it's upholding the law. And it's just an extraordinary challenge that he faces. And in the process, Krishna explains to him many things, and he reveals the truth of the universe. He reveals his own divine being. And Sri Aurobindo tells us that although upholding the Dharma, upholding the law, is one of the reasons that an avatar can come to earth, that's not in itself sufficient, because an avatar can, or the divine can, influence upholding the law anyway, and through the pressure that the divine puts onto the earth, for that to be so. And he also explains that Krishna speaks the truth, of course, because Krishna is the avatar, and that he makes this bridge between earth and heaven, enabling the transformation, the connection, the personal relationship with the divine, and the connection for transformation. I don't know if I'm saying that well enough, but there's so many aspects to it. The divine appears to us in human form to make this bridge so that we don't have to deal only with the universal, which is far beyond our scope, and the transcendent form of the divine, the transcendent state of being of the divine, which is way beyond our conception. But we need this human form in order to be able to relate to the divine and have a personal relationship with the divine, which can then have transformative effect. Because the goal of life is to, as Sri Aurobindo explains, is to grow ever more divine, grow increasingly in the image of the divine. And we need this example before us, because otherwise we wouldn't have a clue. We'd be really lost.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. I think for me, when I went to live in India to learn music, I found that was a really important aspect that I think I was going to say it, like you had said earlier, that aspiration, it kind of varies over the course of somebody's life. It varies according to the place as well. I found myself, when I did spend time at the ashram in Auroville, that being in that place, it changed the nature. It changed how I was able to, I think, open to different types of relationships with the divine and with and different intensities of aspiration. And in terms of the idea of the personal relationship, that was also really, really important to me, like saguna brahman. So the idea that there's qualities, there's a way in which we can enter into a relationality with this in terms of how it appears. I was also in terms of learning music, I was learning North Indian classical music, and And the ragas were also deities of in which you would be able to enter into a relationship with. But my guru, Shantanu Bhattacharya, who in Calcutta was a devotee, and as was his whole family and his mother. But it was really a matter of, I think, learning how to, I think that the intimacy of that connection, of really putting that consciousness within oneself and not looking at it from as like in a dualistic sense. I think that was really important to me. And so I think that this idea in my life generated, it was kind of like a generator, you know, putting me into contact with forces that were beyond what I would normally have access to, let's say. And I just wanted to quickly read a part, just the ending of one of the quotes that you have in your article by Sri Aurobindo, that I think it really, really brought this out for me. So this is just a short quote here from Sri Aurobindo. For there are two aspects of the divine birth. One is a descent, the birth of God in humanity, the Godhead manifesting itself in the human form and nature, the eternal Avataar. And the other is an ascent, the birth of man into the Godhead, man rising into the divine nature and consciousness. Adbhavam agata. It is the being born anew in a second birth of the soul. It is that new birth which Avataarhood and the upholding of the Dharma are intended to serve. And I think that's just such a beautiful quote, which when I read that, the image that came to me was of Sri Aurobindo's symbol, the ascending triangle, the descending triangle. And I think that image, you know, one of my mentor in my PhD work, Debashish Banerjee, he would call that a yantra. It's basically a yantra, right, from the tradition, but it's a diagram of becoming. That's how he would word that, meaning that at the center of this diagram, you have these two forces happening, working, you know. And I think that's exactly how I felt my relationship to work in terms of relation to the idea of an avatar, to the idea of a guru in a way. And yeah, that was just a really, really interesting passage there. Maybe you could respond to that. These are just some thoughts of mine based on what I read.
First of all, I'd like to say it sounds like you've had wonderful experiences in India with studying music, and a very privileged and fortunate situation there. And about the ascent and descent, or descent and ascent, that's so significant because it's the descent of the divine into the manifestation that makes our ascent possible and enables it in every sense. And it's wonderful to reflect that I mean, I feel kind of a little bit critical of Christianity in the sense that, and other traditional religions, that where there's only one avatar, you know, the divine loves us so much. His love is vast and unbelievable in scope, so that he hasn't sent just one avatar, he sent multiple avatars. And the deities that you mentioned in studying your music, you know, the ragas, which represent the deities, there's a great reality to that and significance to that, that it's fortunate when people can recognize that. So Sri Aurobindo has written a lot about sacrifice. Life itself is an exchange, a dynamic exchange of sacrifices. The sacrifice of the divine coming into the manifestation, helping us on our way, the involution of the divine in the manifestation, which is another idea related to oneness, because the divine is within the manifestation. And the concept of brahman is one that Sri Aurobindo advocates for as in the completest way possible. In any case, there's this dynamic exchange of our offering as in response to the offering of the divine. The divine makes this enormous sacrifice in coming to earth in human form, suffering, veiling its divinity and suffering all the troubles that the human life is prey to, including the physical troubles. And then it's all because of the divine's love for us, that to make this bridge between earth and heaven, to make an approachable presence on the earth that we can relate to and have a personal relationship with. And then in turn, we are privileged to be able to offer our works and knowledge and devotion to the divine. And to the extent that we do, our sadhana, the richness of our practice, increases many times over. We have to make this offering in order to develop the connection. So Sri Aurobindo tells us in Synthesis of Yoga that we can start small. We can start anywhere. We can even start with an insincere offering, and the sincerity will grow, and the extent of the offering will increase. And I read recently in studying Hymns to the Mystic Fire that, we can offer our joy. I think those of us who are our joy in life, those of us who are raised in the kind of Calvinistic traditions, don't really think in those terms. But we can offer our joy, our happiness, our gratitude for that to the divine. And as we do so, the intimacy develops, the strength of the connection develops, and then we're rewarded by a fullness that we may not have ever known before.
Yeah, Martha, it's beautiful said. You put it in a wonderful way. So you already answered one of my questions that I had when I read this piece, and very interesting. But what came to my mind is that we have always this conception of the avatar. In fact, you already said that we not only think of only one avatar, especially perhaps in Christianity, but we think of him or her as something making part of the past, which that doesn't play a role in modernity, but it does play a role in modernity, no? So I think maybe you already answered a bit to this question, but if you want to expand, I'm just wondering, because if someone reads this article and would say, okay, nice, but that was many years ago, and now, what is now?
Well, we can anticipate more the presence of the divine on earth. The divine comes particularly as the avatar when in times of crisis, in times when there's disorder, there's chaos. I think perhaps, well, I'm not saying this very well, but we know that Sri Aurobindo played a great role in the Second World War. So perhaps that was the timing that was intended. We can't predict the timing. We always feel that we're in a sense of crisis. We have many crises happening now throughout the world, dire human needs and chaos, but we will see. And also, one thing that I mentioned in the article that I just now remembered is that the Sri Aurobindo tells us that when an avatar comes, even after he's gone, he leaves behind an atmosphere, a force that resonates with humanity. So I think that we can expect that that's the case now with Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and that they're, many of us feel their continuing presence. It's just a reality. So, but for the future, I think there's supposed to be this is the last pralaya, the last dissolution and recreation of the earth. So we may expect another avatar in the future. That remains to be seen.
That's definitely an important question to hold. I was going to ask a question along the lines, you kind of opened this up in terms of bringing in some other traditions. And when I was reading your article, I mean, we're reading the idea of Avataar alongside with other traditions, other histories. And, there has been a lot of blood spilled in Orthodox religion over whose avatar was right or who, right? And so I guess that was one of the ways in which I was approaching the article, with that kind of baggage, if you will, of trying to understand how to really avoid those types of pitfalls. And I expressed earlier my own kind of process, but it seemed to me this diagram with the double arrow in involution, evolution, seemed to me that the individual and their sadhana is kind of in the middle there. Collectively speaking, then it would be, let's say, a whole mandala of these types of diagrams happening. But I guess the problem would be if you then put the avatar on the outside of that and said, well, the avatar is not, it's not possible to be realized, it's outside of me, and it creates some kind of a dualism in the system, saying that we need to either worship this person or this flesh in a way that is never really possible to attain, because they are the chosen one and not us, we're the fallen ones. Or and I guess that's where the idea that this is, it's not the words that are coming to my mind. It's not a matter of passively worshiping something as an avatar, somebody as an avatar, but actively engaging. We were talking about the personal, the intimate personal connection, putting the consciousness within one, so that it's really a matter of relationship that activates one to transform, to really become, to divinize themselves. And I guess that was just something that I wanted to bring up. And I just wanted to hear more of your thoughts along those lines of how we can go forward, and how we can address maybe problems of this dualistic language. The avatar is out there, I am here. But I was wondering about that idea of the consciousness of the avatar in a way. And like you said, when the mother left her body, it was like consciousness was spreading all over the world. It's there for us to open to be in an intimate relation with,
Yes. Well, as we know, Mother and Sri Aurobindo never wanted to be worshipped. There's a scene, I think, in the agenda of where Mother looks out onto the samadhi where Sri Aurobindo's body lies, and she remarks on that, not wanting to be worshipped. And Sri Aurobindo said a similar statement, that we should become, not worship, but become. And I think as you described very well, Jonathan, when we objectify the avatar and think of the avatar as distant, we're not fulfilling what the avatar came to do. We're kind of pushing the avatar away. And when you think about the oneness of the manifestation, that's really where the focus is, realizing that the divine is in us, as what Sri Aurobindo termed the psychic being, the spark of the divine within the manifestation. I mean, all beings, all living beings have that. And that's our link to the divine, which we can amplify as we progress in our sadhana. And it's the link that connects everybody and all life on earth. Because Sri Aurobindo explains in his creation story, and I'll say this very simply, as I understand it, his explanation is much more sophisticated and subtle than I'm able to give. But there was the vast transcendent oneness, the vast transcendent divine. And then he extended himself, wanting a creation, into Satchidananda, which becomes the creative force of the universe. So existence, consciousness, bliss is all combined. And there's the bliss of existence inherent in the creation. So Satchidananda extended itself, and there was nothing but the divine. There is nothing but the divine in the universe. And we're all a part of that. Amazingly, but it's veiled, especially by the exterior consciousness.
Yes, beautiful. And if I could just extend this question then that you had brought up in terms of what may a future avatar be, I was thinking about, maybe it's a creative thought, but the idea of really seeing the consciousness of an avatar in ideally everything, but as it appears in one's life, it could be in non-human forms. Even like I would say that there's, like I mentioned, ragas, for instance, musical forms. But what was coming to mind, because before the episode we were talking ecologically and talking about California and trees, but what came to mind very strongly was when I was in the Redwood Forest with Matteo, SAA's our president and our great friend. And he took us into the Redwood Forest, and he introduced us to a redwood tree that he calls Grandmama. And if there was any type of a non-human type of avatar, something that you could at least open to the possibility that something like a tree could act in that way, in a certain sense. Again, maybe this is a creative thought. It's not necessarily, but it just came to my mind. I was wondering what you would think about that, and how we can engage in the non-human, seeing the divine, seeing the oneness, and really being in such a, like, almost like an infinite kind of singularity with some kind of a non-human form of something that could be an avatar.
We would have to be in relation with that being, and able to have an exchange with it. And so it's certainly within the possible. Seeing the divinity in all beings and in all things is a wonderful goal. And I think, if you try to look at another person with empathy and understand something of their perspective, it's very helpful too. I mean, we all live in our separate, ego-separated consciousness to a great degree, but we have within us this innate awareness of oneness. Because for example, we sympathize, I think our defenses are really down when we sympathize with fictional characters in movies, on TV, or in a book. We're always happy when something good happens to them, and in that way, I think we sense the innate oneness. We feel that way with our friends and associates. We're always glad when something good happens to someone and rejoice for them in that way. And it shows our inherent connections, I think.
Yeah, so I think we have a broad overview now of the significance of the avatar, and what I felt personally most significant were all now I forgot almost, but first of all, that an avatar comes in the period of crisis. Then when you say that there must be a relationship also when an avatar appears in another form, that I found very interesting, this point of view. I never thought about that, because I have a sort of relationship with nature. Yeah, it might sound a very abstract thing, but also in the powers and the phenomenality of nature, there is the divine working. Perhaps we see only the part of ignorance, and the prakriti aspect. But for me, also there can be something in the material manifestation coming through. And then the other key word, so to speak, that I perceived came up over and over again was a principle of oneness. So that there is always in the background this power, this essence of our life and all the phenomenon of the universe that finally, even though it might not appear so for our superficial mental view of things, but behind the scene, there's always oneness. And which brings me also to another article, if we may quickly take a look at this. The main article, the main topic was that on the Avataar, but in the fall 2020 and winter 2021 issue, volume 45, number 23, you have written also a wonderful article entitled Harmony in Oneness. So I think there's a link here between these two articles. They are not two separate points of view where you speak of one thing and then another thing, but there is a relationship here as well. You might perhaps dwell into this a bit shortly.
Yes, certainly. Yes, there's definitely a relationship. And what you say about, Marco, about seeing the beauty in nature and being able to see the divine in nature, it's very much true. I mean, you know that there's this wonderful line in Savitri, beauty is his footprint showing where he has passed. And that's very much expressive of the divine in nature. For harmony and oneness, I've spoken a bit about that, but I think it's really important to emphasize that we are all one. We are all one being. Individual beings, expressive but united, expressing ourselves as individual beings, and united as one underneath. And part of the evidence of that is the fact that we are uncomfortable with harmony. I mean, uncomfortable with disharmony. Sorry. And Sri Aurobindo says all nature seeks a harmony, and that's really evidence of it. That we are uncomfortable with disharmony, and we seek to resolve that. any type of conflict seems retrograde. You know, we're not able to make progress and go forward if we're stopped with a conflict. You know, all of human history, I believe, shows that. And we see that in current situations in life. When you're engaged in conflict, you just can't make progress. You can't move forward until harmony is attained. Disharmony has a retrograde quality that's just really backward. And of course, retrograde means backward, but it's really dark. So I think that to the extent that we all recognize that we have common interests and live as with an awareness of community, we're able to realize the harmony that is within us. Now, that doesn't mean uniformity. It just simply means getting along and recognizing the divinity in each other.
Yeah, I like it very much. Yeah, that also this topic on the oneness is, well, by the way, you say that we are uncomfortable with disharmony. Yes, of course, but we can also be uncomfortable with harmony. I mean, sometimes because our superficial perception of harmony sometimes is, for example, I think that silence. Silence for me is an aspect of harmony. But I know people who get extremely bored and extremely nervous when it's becomes silent. So, but okay, this is a side note from my side.
Well, I was just going to say, sorry, Marco,
Yeah.
if people are bored and restless, then they are not experiencing harmony within themselves.
No.
There's something else going on.
Yeah. And that's a problem of our society to a
It
large
is.
degree.
It truly is.
Yeah.
It truly is. Yeah.
And yes, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
There was once a time in my life when I was experiencing a serious crisis. And at that time, I decided I would resolve never to be bored. Because it was too interesting, you know, it was too interesting, too compelling, and that I should be grateful for stillness and for being, whenever I felt bored, I should feel grateful. Now, the mother had a very strict mother herself, her human mother, and she was, I've forgotten her mother's name now, but she was always very impatient with boredom and said that her children should just find a way to occupy themselves. So we can hope we can occupy ourselves productively, but sometimes that means being quiet.
Very true, very true. It seems we're speaking about harmony and oneness, and what comes to mind is Sri Aurobindo's quote, "All problems of existence are problems of harmony." And I think that when I read that years and years ago when I was living in India, and I'm a jazz musician, but I was learning raga music in India, so I have this Western background, a different kind of music, but that quote really helped me to kind of extend my experiences of musicality into, you know, transmusical ways, like, or intrapersonal or cosmic ways, lots of different ways that are kind of breaking outside of what I had thought was musical, which is music. But if you extend that idea into a cosmic idea, then I feel like I've been approaching that same thing that you just mentioned about how can we be bored in such a, how can we find ourselves bored when for me, there's musicality everywhere all the time. The cosmos is, to me, that's again, my lens, if you will, my life and my sadhana has been mostly through practices of music and different cultural approaches to music and different experiments in between those. But it's interesting because the title of your article, Harmony and Oneness, it's the West has offered me a lot of different approaches to harmony. Western music is very harmonic, very centered on harmony. And if you look at, the Renaissance and going back to Bach, it started to privilege very strongly the concept of harmonic tension and release. And so I grew up in that milieu, and then I started learning jazz, and jazz is very collective. There's a lot of improvisation. And so the problems of harmony when you're in motion, when you're kind of spontaneously composing with people, that problem becomes alive. It's very much alive, saying that we're improvising music together. How can we find ourselves in and out of harmony? And what do we do? How do we develop intuition to kind of feel into the larger collective and feel into where the music wants to go, as opposed to one person's ego, for instance, wants to direct it. And India offered me, when I went to India, very much the idea of oneness, because the raga, if you listen to raga music, and especially North Indian raga music, there's a drone, and that constantly is pulling you. For me, I felt it was kind of pulling me right into the soul. It's kind of that point in the middle of the circle. And so in my life, the title here, it's sort of played out through two different cultural practices of music, but in the largest sense of all life is yoga. I think that's one way that I'm seeing all life is musicality, and I'm constantly playing and experimenting with different types of forces along these lines. But just sort of riffing off of the themes that we brought up in my own kind of practice. I was wondering if we could take a break and hear you read a poem that you've published in the collaboration that is out now. This is going to be the spring 2022, volume 47, number 1. Theme was crisis and emergence, and you have a poem published called Propelled, and I was wondering if you could read that for us.
Sure. Propelled into a morass by an unseen, unknown force, left staggeringly disoriented, the time traveler rights herself while seeking a compass point as indicator of where to proceed for finding direction, purpose, meaning in the swirling chaos with which she is so startlingly presented. A distant point of light emerges, quietly gleaming through the tumult. Seeing this, she knows that it was always there.
Yeah, beautiful poem. To me, it said something, but I would not like to color your answer by telling you what I felt and perceived in this poem. So my question would be, again, what is the kind of message that tries to convey this poem? Or is it necessary that there is a message? Perhaps not. What did impel you to write this poem in these words?
I was experiencing a reflection on rebirth and being so startled by the world one comes into when one begins to develop an awareness of that world. So that's why I use the term time traveler, because we're all time travelers. You know, we come into one age and then another, depending upon what our inner need is. and the need for our evolution, our individual evolution. So the light being always there is the light of truth, the light of the divine, that's constant. You know, we may take a long time to discover it according to our awakening into each life, or we may take a shorter time, but it's always a constant there in our lives, available to us at least.
Yeah, because just to tell you, because what struck me was this finding direction, purpose, meaning. That resonates a lot with me, because I perceive and feel that we are living in a society where there's so much potential, so many things with which we have really, there is no reason to be bored, as you said previously. And yet, especially when I see some young people, and so there is this, they don't find this purpose and this meaning in this direction. And yeah, that's something that I perceived a lot, makes a lot of meaning for me. And this perhaps connects also to the oneness, to the coming of the avatar or the past avatars. It is deep down, it's about purpose. Life without purpose would be something suicidal. I mean, I would kill myself. There's no meaning. And that's the great message that is also, I think, a bit transpires in this. Propelled? Why propelled? I don't get it.
Like this forward energy.
Okay.
Like being sent. I mean, I know we all consent to be born, but just feelings propelled.
Yeah. Good word choice. Yeah. Wonderful, beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful poem, and I think it's also set on the page for those of you with the issue in front of you. Maybe Marco, you could hold it up, because there's a beautiful sculpture there by Patrick Valdio, who we actually interviewed in our last podcast, and I think it's a nice coupling of words and spirit through word and through form. And I guess the first thing that I found quite profound about this is that question of the unknown, unseen force. And especially in relation to kind of generating goals, or generating, I'd say, kind of finding like kind of a framework of becoming, or finding our purpose. There's lots of different ways to describe it, I guess, but I just thought that was really beautiful how you brought out the idea that it's not something that is entirely up to us and our mind. Specifically, the mind can plan, it can chart, it can organize, and we can organize our life. We can have a goal, but I think that was one thing that I really was deeply confronted with when I went to India. I realized that I was very much a mental being. I was playing music a lot from the mind, although I had moments where I was able to get beyond that. And that was when I would say that I had certain types of inspirations, or even types of mystical experiences, which the mind can't comprehend. But I think I had to have an experience like that to open me to the fact that there are a lot of unknown, unseen forces that are not there to distract us necessarily. Some maybe, but I think that there's a lot that we need to open to, and that idea of aspiration, and a lot of the other different types of themes that we've been speaking about today. There's this idea that there are forces and that cannot be known by the mind, but we need to open ourselves to. And there at the end of the poem, a distant spot of light emerges. It's like, well, if we're open to that force, if we're open to if we're being, another word, disoriented. We're in this kind of a chaotic space where there's a lot of forces, there's a lot of energy, but there is still this idea that there's something that is always there. There's that light. And I think that being open to the unknown, I think, well, in my life, it's allowed me to see that kind of light maybe in the horizon, rather than just see it as another passing moment or another and not something that's not important. But anyway, I'm just trying to express some of the things that came out when I read your poem, and I think that's really the outside, beyond the mind, beyond the condition of the mind. Maybe you could speak a little bit about how poetry works in your sadhana, and how you have how it is in relation to the mind and to expression, and to how do you kind of get into a place where you are writing from that surrender, a place of aspiration.
Yes, I think poetry is able to express through a combination of words what the mind may resist, and it's not logical, it's not analytical, but it can go beyond that. I know we all love Savitri, Sri Aurobindo's extremely marvelous epic poem that's so sublime. And Sri Aurobindo's poetry, some of which is in this issue, is far beyond and superior to anything that normal mortals can write, I think. But we can, when I write poetry, it tends to be late at night and expressing some kind of aspiration or coping with difficulties in life. And it's I can kind of get into a space that's partly mental and partly, I hope, above that, and that yields me some language. I get in tune with my feelings and try to convey that on paper.
Yes, so I think the note, if there are other questions from my side, well, there are a lot of questions, of course, but I think we have now gone more or less, have had an overview of what you write and what your passions are, and what your spirit is longing for. It can be perceived, I think. And maybe we can wrap it up. If Jonathan, do you have any questions, or Martha, do you have, or is there something more that you would like to say? So we can wrap it up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, thanks for being with us, Martha. It's been a fantastic time spent together, and I look forward to what you come up with to publish in future editions of Collaboration, because you've been a long time collaborator, and I think I'll always look forward to seeing your works in the journal. So thanks for being with us. And definitely, like Marco said, there's always more questions, but we'll never get bored of asking questions as a podcast host. But that means that we'll have to have you back another time.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you both.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you, Jonathan.
See you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.